Before the wedding began, I thought all I had to do was hand her an envelope and watch her smile. I thought 40 years of hard work, late nights, and small sacrifices would be enough. I was wrong. What happened next erased everything I believed about family, loyalty, and what it means to be a father. If you stay until the end, you'll hear the moment that changed my life, and why I walked away smiling. I'm Dewey Gomez. I worked 40 years on the assembly line at the Ford plant. I married Elena when we were barely 20, we scraped together a house, painted the rooms ourselves, and raised our daughter, Tia, though everyone calls her Letitia. When Elena died, it was just me and Tia. So I did what every father does, I doubled down. I worked overtime, I mended shirts by hand, I ate peanut butter sandwiches so my kid had new shoes. That's how you love someone when love is all you've got to give. Years later, Letitia called me from her high-rise townhouse and started showing me wedding magazines like she was describing art. She tapped photos, chandeliers, a ballroom that looked like a palace, flowers that must have cost more than my entire savings. My throat closed up. I told her about my savings, $12,000. I pushed the number out quietly like it was a confession. Her face changed. The excitement drained away, replaced by a cold assessment that hurt more than any slap. 12,000, she said. Other fathers do more. What are you willing to do for your daughter? Those words landed like bricks. I sat in my truck afterward and watched the perfect lawns of Bloomfield Hills reflect in the windows. My house looked smaller than ever. That night I sat in Elena's old chair and stared at our photos. I could see all the things we'd done right. I could see how small our sacrifices looked in a world obsessed with shine. The next morning, I walked into a bank that felt like a different planet. They approved me for $35,000 at 18% interest. The total repayment would be more than half my pension. Still, I signed. For my daughter, I decided, I'd risk whatever it took. 2 hours later I rang her bell, heart beating out of my chest, the cashier's check heavy in my pocket. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked, casual, like I'd interrupted a TV show. I handed the envelope to her and told her the truth, I did what I could. "Here, this will pay for your dream." She looked at the envelope like it belonged to someone else. "Oh, that's not needed," she said, flat. "Dennis is paying for everything." Dennis, the man who owned restaurants, the man with the money handier than his manners. The words hit me so hard I could taste metal. "Just return it then," she shrugged, already back to her magazines. No gratitude. No warmth. I drove away feeling more foolish than when I'd walked in. I didn't want to lose my home or my dignity. I drove straight back to the bank and told them to cancel the loan. They charged me a $500 early repayment fee. I paid it without argument. I gave up money to keep my pride. That night, I sat in Elena's chair and asked the empty room a question that had been growing inside me for months: had I been loving the wrong way? I decided then I would stop begging for crumbs of respect for my own daughter. If she wanted a father with a different name on his checks, fine, but she would not take my life for granted. Weeks passed and something shifted. Invitations arrived, but with caveats. "You can come, Dad, just don't make a scene." Dress fittings I wasn't invited to, vendor meetings held at times I'd be at work. I played the patient man, respectful in public, quiet in the corners. Yet my mind kept returning to one fact: there were things she didn't know about herself. Things Elena and I had kept secret, not to hurt, but to protect. I began to write. I wrote to her the way a man confesses what he can no longer hide. I told the truth about where she came from, about a night that changed 2 lives, about the reason Elena and I ever became a family. I folded the pages with fingers that had fixed thousands of things over the years: radios, carburetors, broken toys, things I knew how to make whole again. I sealed the letter and placed it inside a wedding envelope that would look like any other gift. Then came the cruelest line of all: the printed time on my invitation. The card in my hand said 1 p.m. The other invitations, the ones ending up in the right hands, said 12 o'clock. Someone, somewhere, had made sure I wasn't on that church aisle. Whether it was a printing error or something more deliberate, I will never know. But when I stood outside St. Paul Church and saw Letitia walk down that aisle with someone else's arm around her, it felt like 40 years had been erased with a single sheet of paper. I sat on a bench across the street. The bell pealed inside and the organ swelled. Letitia looked radiant, but the look on Dennis's face said everything I needed to know. He fit into the role of father the way a man fits into a suit he was meant to wear. I closed my eyes and opened the envelope in my jacket. The letter I'd written stared back like a small hammer waiting to fall. I folded it into the gift envelope and slipped it into my pocket. At the reception, everyone moved in the kind of choreography reserved for milestone ceremonies. Laughter, small talk, polite applause. I entered like a man who had rehearsed his line, proud father arriving late. I handed the envelope to Marcus's hands when Letitia presented it to him, unaware of its real weight. It looked like any other gift, except that inside, not money, but a truth was waiting to be opened. The room quieted as Letitia lifted her glass to give thanks. Her words were smooth, practiced. "I want to thank everyone," she said, and then, with a voice that cut through silk, she added, "I have always dreamed of having a different father." The words landed like a grenade. Conversation stopped. Champagne glasses paused 3 inches from lips. I felt eyes on me then, curiosity, disapproval, pity. Dennis beamed, embraced her, accepted the role she'd offered him. I stood very still. No anger. No shouting. Just a calm like a winter night. Later, after the toasts and the laughter resumed like a tide returning, my phone began to buzz. The first text, "Dad, we found the envelope." A second, "Dad, what's this?" Then a call, Letitia's voice, a thin wire of panic. "Dad, the letter, it says I was adopted. This can't be true." I let the calls come. I had given her something she could not unhear. The adoption papers in my envelope were proof, official documents, names, the story of a little girl who lost her parents in a car crash, and the couple who chose to love her without condition. That night, her voice changed. It went from smug certainty to raw, unsteady disbelief. "Dad, please," she begged. I didn't mean it. I didn't rush back. I sat with the radio and a road atlas and a cup of Elena's tea. The house felt lighter. Calls kept coming, she wanted explanations, forgiveness, a restoration that money had never bought. But what she wanted wasn't mine to give any longer. She had traded the man who had fixed her bike, who'd stayed up when she was sick, who'd wiped tears and cheered at graduations, for a perfect day and a pretty speech. I packed the things I needed. Photos that mattered. Elena's wedding band. My toolbox. The rest could stay. I left a note for myself more than for anyone else: "You did what you could." I drove until the city lights thinned and the air got warmer. I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, relief. Not from victory. From release. I had been a father for 35 years, and in that span I had been more than biology. I had been choice, patience, late nights, and lunchboxes packed. If she could not see that, then her loss was not mine to carry. People ask me, wasn't it hard? Yes. There are nights I miss her laugh like an ache. There are days I wonder if I am cruel for leaving. But there are also mornings when I wake up and realize I am no longer shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. I am allowed to be small in a world obsessed with grand gestures. I am allowed to be honest, to live with quiet dignity. If you remember one thing from this story, let it be this: love isn't always measured by checks or ceremonies. Real love is the small, stubborn things you do day after day, the jobs you keep, the prayers you say, the birthdays you remember. You can buy an event. You cannot buy the years someone gave you. That truth finally set me free. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe, it helps more than you know. Tell me in the comments what you would do in my place. Would you confront? Walk away? Forgive? I read every comment. Thank you for listening. To hear another story like this, click the video on the left. And remember, sometimes the hardest choice is the one that saves your peace.